Hey, what's going on, everybody? God bless you. Thank you for tuning into today's video. I hope my videos have been helpful for some of you, and today I'm just going to kind of do my usual pontifications, but I think that they're a little more than that, so I hope that this video will help somebody out there in the YouTube stratosphere. Um, so today's beginning of the video. Oh yeah, that was my last job that I worked. I was a snowcat operator, and it was really fun, except it was at night, so it was really hard for me to stay up at night. And that kind of makes me think of the verse where Jesus says, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? He who walks in the day will not stumble, but he who walks at night will stumble." And I was kind of I wasn't like applying that as saying it was sinful to work at night or anything, but it's kind of true that we're meant to be awake during the day. And this is not to say if you work during the night it's a bad thing. Like, I respect that's a hard thing to do. But for me, it was prudent that I was going to have to work in the daytime. So today I was just thinking a little bit about Rome and politics and the political atmosphere right now, and how everybody's thinking, what's going on in the politics. And this is kind of related to the church and our place within the world. And so there's a lot kind of jogging around in me noggin, and I wanted to throw some of these ideas at you, but I think it might be interesting and helpful. So first I want to start with the idea of a slinky. Actually, my friend brought this idea up to me, and it was really interesting because there's these two ideas about the way that time and history work. The first idea is that time is linear, and that everything occurs on a linear course, and therefore everything is different, and there's not really the idea that history repeats itself is false, because time is linear, everything's different. There might be things that happen that are similar, but whatever happens that's similar is purely coincidental. And the other idea is that time is cyclical, and if time is cyclical, well, then it's moving and it has different events happening on it, but those events overlap. But there's a hybrid idea, and my friend brought this idea up to me, and I thought it was really powerful. And it's like a slinky. So a slinky, if you spread it out, it goes in a circle, but it also is going in a direction. It's not every time it goes around the circle, it ends up on the same idea, or something similar to what happened at that point in the circle beforehand. And so we can kind of see traces of that in generations, because of the commonality of human beings, that we have things in common, and each generation has something that happens to it that maybe resembles something that happened before. And so that's why a lot of people like to look backwards and to see things as representing, they like to look backwards and see certain events or ideas as representing something that's coming new, although the new one isn't actually completely contained in the old. They're not the same thing, but they do have overlaps. And so the idea of the overlapping events, I think, represents what happens in history. And it also corresponds with the idea that there's nothing new under the sun, that everything that happens is a pattern of what comes before. So the idea of patterns, and I talk about that a lot in my videos. But today I was going to zoom in on a specific idea that I was just reading about, because a lot of people don't understand how Rome fell, and I don't understand how Rome fell. And America and Western civilization is kind of similar to Rome in that it's been around for so long, and it's such a advanced civilization, and we seem to be seeing in the last few years a possible doom to civilization that's coming through, not through any objective event, but through a string of causes, and deep down, some people are recognizing that it's a moral depravity. And so St. Augustine, in his book City of God, he starts out writing about the Roman situation. And at that time, many Romans were blaming Christians for their circumstance that they were stuck in. And so Christians were kind of the scapegoat for the Roman predicament, whether it was political. I don't know too much about that time frame that he was in, what was happening. But this had kind of been happening since Christianity was introduced into Rome. Christians were blamed for crimes they didn't commit under Nero, and I think there were other emperors that followed who similarly blamed Christians for crimes they didn't commit. So let me see where I'm going to go with this, because my videos, again, they're free flowing thought off the top of my head, but I think that it's important to, I want to tie this in with where we are now in America, because I think there's obviously a similarity there between when Rome was kind of decaying. There was another thinker that Augustine talks about named Cicero, and Cicero recognized that Rome had entered into its predicament because it had abandoned kind of the zeal and the wisdom of the people who had founded the nation. And so right now, I'm not saying this is a conservative video, I think it kind of is, but that conservatives are saying, well, hey, if we just move forward and go after change and transformation, even if there might be some good motivations in going in that progressive direction and changing and altering everything, and we just abandon all of the foundations, then we might be in trouble, because we're forsaking the wisdom on which this country was built, and the foundation on which this country was built. And so that's a possibility, and that's a danger that Cicero recognized and Augustine recognized, but Augustine was recognizing it through the need for Christ, and he was looking at this through the lens of, I'm not sure how much he had a supernatural worldview, but he obviously was a Christian. He believed in Christ, and he knew that the Romans at that time were worshiping other gods. And these gods, the Romans were attributing the highest authority to. And so they would go to the gods for help, and these gods in return would help them in certain areas of their lives. And Augustine recognized the gods' probability as not just being make-believe, but probably being demons and being actual spiritual powers that had a certain level of control. And so you have the Christians who are worshiping Jesus and Yahweh, and you have the Romans who are, well, the Christians were Romans, but you have pagans in Rome who were worshiping other gods, and the Christians are saying, well, hey, it's because you're worshiping these demons, that's why there's all this chaos. And the Romans are saying, hey, it's because you're not worshiping the gods like we are, that's why the gods are pouring out wrath on the nation. And it's something like that. That's probably an oversimplification. But nevertheless, there was a decay that was tangibly happening in the Roman state. It was starting to erode, and it wasn't anything objective, and it wasn't anything that they could pin and say this is the reason why it happened, and that's why still historians argue why it happened. And so if America was to fall, and if Western civilization was to start decaying and falling, which it's probably already in a state of decay. Actually, it is. I don't know why I say probably. But if it was to fall, in 1,000 years, of course, if Christ doesn't come back before that, I think he will, but that's just me. In 1,000 years, they're going to look back and they're going to say, well, how did the Western civilization fall? What happened? And everybody's going to look at it from a different perspective depending on their beliefs. So there's this idea of, in Bonhoeffer's writings in Ethics, a reconciler. I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but it's basically